This is episode 5, starting something new and following it through. Welcome to the Hand Lettering Podcast. I'm Tam Love, hand lettering artist with a degree in art and design and more than 10 years experience specialising in pencil illustrations. I write and create for letteringtutorial.com, a place to find tutorials, interviews, resources and more. Join me as I talk about all things lettering. Hello and welcome to the first episode of 2016. And don't worry if you're listening to this sometime in the future, be it later in 2016 or maybe another year entirely. Everything in this episode should still be pretty current, so nothing should outdate hopefully too much. The title of this podcast episode, Starting Something New and Following It Through, should perhaps give a bit away about what's going to be discussed in this episode. But the fact that it's the start of a brand new year seemed like a really great time to cover the content of this episode. It's not too uncommon at all for people to take up new activities at the beginning of a new year. Things like new hobbies, new fitness, health, exercises, those sort of things. People also take up a lot of new art activities as well, and that definitely includes hand lettering. So hello to anybody that's brand new to hand lettering that's just joined in for this 5th episode. I do recommend going back and having a listen to episodes 1 to 4. It doesn't matter if you do that before or after this one. Whether you're starting hand lettering, brush lettering or calligraphy or any of those sorts of things from scratch right now, or whether perhaps you're trying to start a new aspect of something that you already know. So maybe you've already done illustrative hand lettering and now you want to try and master brush lettering, or maybe you've been doing calligraphy and you want to try and master brush lettering. No matter kind of what you're trying to do, or perhaps maybe you're trying to practice more regularly and that's the something that you want to start new. It doesn't matter what it is. Hopefully the content of this episode will be helpful to you. And also whether you're listening kind of now as it goes sort of live, or whether you're listening in a few months' time, even a couple of years' time, as I said sort of briefly a moment ago, hopefully again everything will still all be relevant in this episode. It doesn't matter when you start something, so this isn't specifically for people that have just started something new at the beginning of the year. You can take up something new anytime you want, at any point in your life, so this should still apply then if you're not taking it up in the beginning of January. So as this podcast episode is all about starting something new and following it through, I'd be a little bit of a hypocrite, I think, if I wasn't trying to take up something new myself also. So I've kind of got a couple of things that I'm working on. One is to practice more regularly and try and document that. I've been doing bits here and there, and I've been doing bits for specific articles on letteringtutorial.com. I've also been doing a couple of projects for other people, did some lettering for Christmas presents as well. So I've been doing quite a bit, but I haven't been doing kind of daily practice, which is something I want to get into the habit of. So that's one of my starting something new things. Then the other thing is turning this podcast series into a weekly episode series. So at the moment, new episodes go out every other week, usually on a Tuesday as well. I had a little bit of a break over the Christmas period, so I didn't look too antisocial with my family, but back now. And the plan going forwards is to try and bring out a new episode weekly. So that's quite a big thing for me to try and do, and I definitely have the intention and hopefully the commitment there to follow that through. So previously episodes would follow a pattern of the first part of the episode I would talk about a particular topic, and then the second part of the episode was all about inspiration. So I will feature an artist, a lettering artist, a specific piece of work that they've created that's sort of attracted my attention and that I think is beneficial for you to have a look at too. I then provide an inspiring quote that you can hand letter that's kind of a goodish one for beginners, although any level you can obviously letter it. And then finally I move on to some questions and answers about lettering, things that you submit or things that pop up that I think could be of, again, benefit to you. So that's how the structure of the previous episodes have looked. Going forwards, what I'm going to experiment with doing is talking about a specific topic in one episode, and then the following episode, so the next week's episode, will focus on the featured artist, their work, a quote, and the questions. Then the next week again will be a topic, and then the week after that, questions, etc. So essentially I'm taking the same structure that was there originally and kind of splitting it down the middle. So you're still getting the same content over the same time frame, I guess, just weekly as opposed to just with a gap in between. So I hope that works better for you. I know some of the feedback from you has been you'd love to have it weekly, and that it seems a little sort of a waiting for that second week to kind of come around. So as always though, please do feedback to me. I'd love to know your thoughts on this. If you love it, tell me. If you hate it, please tell me, because this is not set in stone. It's just a bit of an experiment. I'll see what you guys think. I'll see obviously how I get on with it, because it's quite a lot of work to put together. I'm trying to obviously silence my dog for periods of time as well, because he likes to bark. Can be a challenge, but we'll see how it goes. But do let me know what you think. It would be great to hear from you. You can do that by going to, emailing ask@letteringtutorial.com. You can leave me some feedback there. Otherwise, if you pop on to iTunes or Stitcher, you can also leave an honest review and rating there, and I can have a look at that then and take on board and apply your thoughts and suggestions. So it'd be great to hear what you think. I'm going to assume that if you're listening to this, you've already picked the thing that you want to start new, be that hand lettering from scratch, be that an element involved in lettering, or like me practicing more, or that you're going to sort of give that some thought and then decide on what you might like to start new. And from there, I'm going to look into the kind of the following it through part, because that tends to actually be the hardest bit. Often you get all these fantastic ideas and that's not a problem. You know you want to do this, you know you want to try this. It's just keeping that going, turning it into a habit, or making it something that you actually enjoy doing. So that's what this episode is going to revolve around, those elements. The first thing I'm going to discuss is passion. So when you choose something new to start, so let's say you're starting hand lettering from scratch, you might have an overwhelming amount of passion to just start doing that. And as you start lettering, that passion just builds and builds. And that's fantastic, because that passion can fuel you. But some of you might find that you've only got a little bit of passion to begin with, and maybe that doesn't really grow, or maybe you start with a little bit of passion, but then the more you kind of do it, that passion starts to fade a little bit, and then you can lose your drive to kind of keep going and keep creating. So what do you do when that happens? I think one of the most important things you can do if you find you're struggling with your passion, that you're just not really feeling it with what you're doing, is to experiment a little bit with what you're doing. So if you're trying just illustrative lettering, switch around, maybe try brush lettering or calligraphy, because you might find one of those kind of fills you up with passion a bit more initially. Otherwise, surround yourself by inspiring things. So that might be pieces of lettering that you really love, that you really, really wish you could create. Lettering artists that you love their work. Surround yourselves by passionate people as well, because that can have a knock-on effect. If you're, so for example, go on to somewhere like Facebook or Instagram, follow some really, really passionate people that are really passionate about their work. They're kind of giving out their passion in a way, and it rubs off on you. That can really help boost that in that situation. If you find it's just not there at all anymore, and that no matter how hard you try, you just can't create any passion, it might just perhaps be that lettering isn't for you at that time. You don't necessarily have to write it off completely. It might be a case of coming back and trying it a few months down the line, maybe even a couple of years down the line, because you might be in a different place at that point. People change and grow. I know for a fact there's certain things that I hated when I was younger and as a teenager, but now as a what I'd class it, I probably am a grown up. Yes, don't like thinking of myself as a grown up, but I have been, I guess, for quite a while now actually. But yeah, I guess as an adult, I've changed. I like certain things now that I didn't used to, and vice versa as well. So you don't necessarily have to write it off completely. But maybe if that passion isn't there, then perhaps just try something else, try another artistic aspect. And you never know, it might even lead you back to lettering eventually as well. Fear is one of the biggest obstacles that can stop you from following things through. So that can include things like fear of not being good enough or fear of failing. So what can you do if you're struggling with fear of not being good enough? So one of the first things you can do is try your best not to compare yourself to others. So that can be difficult because you obviously generally, when you start lettering new or you start a new aspect of lettering, you want to improve, and often the way to see if you've been improving is to compare yourself to other people and compare your work to their work and think, oh well, mine's similar to that, or I've managed to do that in mine. But that can sometimes be a downfall, because if you compare yourself to somebody who's perhaps not on the same level as you, so for example, if you're a complete beginner and you're comparing yourself to somebody who's perhaps sort of an intermediate to a high level, that can kind of crush you a little bit. So one of the best ways to actually compare and see if you've improved is to actually compare your work to your own work. So keep a record of all of the work that you create right from the very beginning. Just photograph it. You don't have to share that on social media if you don't want to. You can just keep that to yourself until you feel comfortable enough putting it up on social media if that's what you want to do. But at least by then keeping a record of your work, you can see where you're making improvements, and you can perhaps still see areas of weakness. So you want to avoid, if you can, at all cost, comparing yourself to others, starting off with. As you kind of go along and you build up confidence, then it's not so bad. But when you're first starting out, it's one of the worst things you can do, because it usually just ends up making you feel quite bad about yourself, and it doesn't actually benefit you in any way at all, unless you know 100% that that person is on exactly the same level as you, that has put in exactly the same amount of hours of practice as you, has exactly the same previous skill set as you. Then you don't really gain much from comparing yourself to them. Another thing you can do if your fear of not being good enough is getting in the way and stopping you from following something through, is to seek encouragement from those that support you. So that could be anybody in your life that you know will support you and encourage you. So that could be family, friends, parents, sibling, children, you've got kids, could be a teacher, a professor, a work colleague, anybody in your life that is supportive to you and that provides you encouragement can be a good person to have around when when you're fearing that you're not going to be good enough. Because if they've never lettered before and you've been lettering for a couple of weeks, you will be better than they are, and they're going to give you, all being well, just positive encouragement, and that can be what you need sometimes to drive you and to move you forwards and to keep you on the track of lettering and practicing, and it can help to build your confidence. If you find that you don't have people around that can perhaps offer that kind of support, or you don't know anybody, or if you don't feel confident enough showing people that are significant in your life your personal artwork, because I know for some people it can be a personal thing, you can always go online and find groups, or I'm just trying to think, I don't think there's too many, there's probably a couple of them around, but too many lettering forums, places where you don't necessarily have to go on as yourself. You can go on sometimes anonymously, or choose a different name if you want to, and you can share your work there and get positive encouragement back. So I help to maintain a group on Facebook called Hand Lettering HQ, which I probably mentioned in a couple of past episodes now, and that tends to be quite a good supportive group. So we've got people of all different skill levels on there for lettering. We get new people on saying, this is my first sort of go at lettering, sharing their work, to people that have been doing it a while that are showing their work. But it can be, again, a great way to get encouragement and can show that you're not actually, there's no issue. You are good enough. You can only get better, and can give you that positive reinforcement. So that's a potential avenue to look into if you have got that kind of fear of not being good enough. When it comes to fear of failing, there's a few things you can try and do to stop you from feeling like this. So one of the first things that I think is worth talking about, and that I see happen so many times, and I'm guilty 100% of doing it myself on numerous occasions, and even though I'm saying it now and I know it, I'll probably still do it again at some point in the future as well. When you're taking on something new, again, it's that habit you compare yourself to other people, and you see other people doing something really great and you want to try and do the same. And so you try and essentially take on a task that's perhaps a bit too big to start off with. And then you're kind of setting yourself up really to not do as well as you would like, because the challenge is perhaps a little bit unrealistic for your level of skill. Now, it's always good to challenge yourself, don't get me wrong. You don't always want to make things really easy for you. But one of the best examples I can perhaps give is when I was about 16, I think it was, maybe 15, I decided I wanted to try and learn the guitar. I hadn't had lessons of any kind. I did have piano lessons, so I had musical knowledge, but the piano and guitar are pretty different. And I was in a bit of a kind of a rock music phase as well, so I was listening to, I'm just trying to think now, things like Guns N' Roses, and who else was there? Just trying to think now, it was so long ago. Anyway, getting sidetracked there, but I picked a stupidly hard rock song to try and learn as my first ever song, and without a surprise at all. I didn't get very far with it because it was way too much out of my depth to begin with. And another example, really, it's not something I've done, but it seems like a good example of explaining. Like if you're starting to learn baking, and you're learning to bake cakes, you wouldn't take on one of the challenges that you kind of see if you're from the UK. I don't know if you get it elsewhere in the world. There's a program called the Great British Bake Off, and they give them a challenge sort of towards the end where they have to bake like at least a 3-tiered cake, and each cake has to be a different flavour, and it's quite an extensive challenge. Now, if you're first starting to learn how to bake, it's very unlikely you try and tackle something quite so big where you're having to make at least 3 different types of cake, get them all, perfect consistency and, smooth, don't burn them, get them to stack and so on, the right sizes. You're not likely to start there. You're most likely to start off making the simplest kind of cake you can. And the same applies to things like lettering. It's not a good idea to start with this, epic, huge 12-word, magnificent, swirly quote with loads of detail, and I can't even think of any more words to describe something so big. But realistically, it's good to start off small and then build up and just take on a sort of a slightly bigger challenge and a slightly bigger challenge, and just slowly expand your skills and your knowledge and your tool set. And every so often, it's fine, throw yourself in and take on a really big challenge, and it doesn't matter if you don't do as well at it as you hoped you would, because you can learn from it and take what you learn. But when you're first starting off, if you take on a really huge challenge, more often than not, it just overwhelms you. You don't get the results you hoped, and then you just kind of give up, really, because you're so kind of disappointed with what happened. You get it in your head, you can't do this thing, you can't do lettering, or you can't learn calligraphy, and then it's the automatic response, just go, oh, never mind, I'm not going to bother trying to do this now. So start off small, and hopefully then that's going to stop you from getting that awful feeling of, I've failed, I can't do this. It should certainly limit how often you experience that initially. And then, like I say, the more experience you get, give yourself the opportunity to feel that a few times, because it will only help you grow and develop more. A couple of the other things that can make following something new through tend to be not getting good fast enough. So I'm again guilty of thinking that in numerous different situations where, again, this is why you shouldn't compare yourself, see, because you compare yourself to the standards of others, and then you see, the work that they're producing, you compare it to your work, and you think, I should be better, I want to be better, and it's a natural thing with us, I think, as a society nowadays, to want things quite quickly, because in most circumstances we can get things quite quickly. You can download music now on the internet and have that straight away. When I was a teenager, I had to walk into town, go to the nearest supermarket, buy a CD to get the latest chart single. Whereas now it's just a couple of taps away on a phone. The same with books. The same with a lot of things. Online shopping, you can just order it, it turns up at your door, and you can get next day delivery. Some places do same day. So I think as a society, we've started to get used to getting things quite quickly. And often with skills like lettering, if you practice a lot and regularly, you can get to a good standard quite quickly. But more often than not, it does take a little bit of time. So it's learning to be patient, but like I say again, not comparing yourself to others. Just again, compare yourself to yourself. So like I said before, take photos of your work from the beginning, and then a couple of months down the line you can look at your latest piece, compare it back to your first or second piece maybe, and think, wow, look how much I've improved. Not, look at your latest piece and look at your favourite lettering artist's latest piece and go, oh man, my work's just, it's just rubbish compared to theirs. That's what you don't want to be doing. And if you're avoiding that at, that sort of stage, but you're still trying to get into the habit of doing lettering, you're trying to make it a routine, then hopefully that's going to help you stick to that. So don't compare. Mindset can also be a thing that stops you from following something through. So by that I mean, I'm just trying to think how to kind of phrase it properly. Like the way you think about certain situations. So the example I'm going with is you kind of miss doing a day of practice or learning, and then you just kind of give up because you kind of miss one day, and then the next day comes and you think, I probably should do double the practice today really to catch up on yesterday, and then that makes you not want to do that day, and then a few days go by and you think, well, I haven't done it now for a few days, I'll just, never mind, I'm going to give up, and again, not follow it through. So when you think that, and again, I'm guilty of doing this with numerous things. In the past, I've started to try and do things, and I'll do them quite well for a week or so, and then I'll miss a day, and then I'll beat myself up for missing that day, and then I just kind of just don't carry on with it. And it's a normal human thing to do. It is perfectly normal, so don't give yourself a hard time if you've done that in the past or think, oh, I shouldn't have done that. It's frustrating. It can definitely be frustrating, but it does happen. So how can you kind of get around that mindset if you find you've fallen into that sort of mindset? How can you get around that? So there's a few things you can do to try and keep your practice going regularly. So one of those things is to try and form a habit of when you practice each day, so it starts to become a routine. So often choosing the same time each day can be one of the best ways to do that. And earlier in the day is often better again, if you can, like perhaps in the morning before you go to work or school or wherever. I find sometimes, or I found, I would say, with things in the past where if I've left it till like the evening to do things, sometimes I'll run out of time because stuff during the day is sort of, there's been extra things or stuff I haven't accounted for, and then my time's kind of overrun a little bit and overrun a bit more until I get to the evening and I'm either really tired or I just haven't got the time, and by the time I'm done, eating and whatnot, it's sort of more or less time to go to bed. So I find if you can kind of fit it in, I think morning or afternoon, that's better. And if you can try and do it at the same time each day, that's even better again. I know life stops that from happening a lot of the time, but it certainly does help in trying to build a habit and a routine. So that's one thing you can do, which is going to aid you. If you just pick random times every day, don't really even think about scheduling it in, you're probably more likely to forget to do it. And like I say, once you've forgotten a few times, you sort of end up going down that route of, oh, well, I haven't done it now for a few days, I might as well give up sort of attitude. You can also do things to hold yourself accountable. So when I say accountable, that means generally like feeling like you kind of are responsible for doing that thing. So you could tell somebody, this is what I plan to do. I've obviously told all of you that I plan to now try and make the podcast series weekly, so that's definitely holding me accountable. So you could tell your partner, a friend, I'm planning to start lettering and I want to practice Monday to Friday each week. You could write it on your blog if you've got one, on a Facebook page, profiles, a status update, any of those things really. It just might help you, kind of give you a little bit of a push if you're struggling, or if you kind of know in the back of your mind, if you don't feel a little bit kind of obligated to anyone, you're not likely to push yourself enough. I do it sometimes with certain things where I need people to just give me that extra push and get me into gear. And once I'm going, I'm fine. But it's just that initial starting off kind of phase that I need that little extra bit of, sort of support, and I get that through holding myself accountable. If you do end up missing a day or two, even more, don't beat yourself up about it. So say you've decided, say you've been lettering well and you've decided that you want to try and do practice daily, and you've missed some of that practice. Don't give yourself a hard time for missing it. Things do happen, things pop up unexpectedly, you do get tired sometimes, you do get poorly sometimes. There's things that you just can't help happening, and it's no good giving yourself a hard time if you do have to miss it for a day or two. Just do the best you can to pick up where you left off the next day that you're able to practice. And like I say, don't try and catch up either, because that puts you off. So if you've missed practice for a few days in the week and then you start to tell yourself, I need to do 3 hours of practice next, it's just going to put you off. Just stick to what you've been doing. It doesn't really matter, because otherwise you end up going around in a vicious circle. If you kind of think, I need to do more practice now this day, that puts you off, and then you lose another day, and eventually then you miss so many days that you either have to start from kind of square one with it, or you just don't start at all. And it doesn't, obviously the amount of practice you do does matter, but if you've only got time for, say, 10 minutes a day, it's better to do 10 minutes a day than none at all. So some practice is better than no practice. And that the same applies to, whatever it is that you're wanting to start new, be it lettering from scratch, be it just brush lettering or calligraphy, an element of lettering overall. It doesn't matter. You might only be able to do 10 minutes a week for maybe 6 months, but then you might, be able to free up your schedule and do a bit more. Or maybe for a while you might even have to cut back and just do 5 minutes a day, but that's still better than no practice at all. That will still put you ahead of the person that hasn't started lettering at all. And there will be somebody else out there on the same level as you as well. So you don't need to kind of worry about trying to be, as best as somebody else again. That's sort of where the comparing it comes into. You just do what you can, whatever that may be. Obviously it's good if you can make more time, because the more you do practice, the better you generally get, and obviously the quicker you can get there. But everybody has their own pace that they work at. Find yours. Don't find somebody else's again. Just work at what's comfortable for you, or what's realistic for you as well. If you set yourself the goal of trying to practice for 2 hours each day, and realistically you can only make time for half an hour a day, again you're going to end up getting into this sort of negative mindset and probably abandoning your lettering. So try and not compare yourself to others, again, in that situation. So those things aren't every obstacle that you're going to probably encounter when you do try and start something new and keep at it. But those are some quite common things that I know other people have come across and that I've definitely experienced a number of times in my life. So hopefully that information will help you if that's something that you're struggling with, or help you in the future if you're not quite at that point yet where you're taking up something new, but down the line you probably will. Whether it's something lettering related or not, it can still all be applied to other things. You'll hopefully find that maybe some obstacles that we haven't talked about in this episode, that the content can be applied to those things as well, especially the not comparing yourself, because I think that's one of the most important things there. It keeps popping up again and again and again for completely different things. But yeah, so hopefully that will help you, especially if you have opted into taking up lettering beginning of this year, or if you're just listening in the future. Hopefully it will help you to stick at it, get past those initial kind of bumps that you get when you start anything new, really, and get to, the good point where you get to enjoy what you're doing. You don't really have to think about practice, it's just kind of natural to you, or it all becomes kind of a habit and something that you really enjoy. If you have any questions at all about starting something new, in particular lettering related things, or anything that relates to kind of artistic practice, anything like that at all, please feel free to ask. You can either do that by sending me an email to ask@letteringtutorial.com, or you can head on over to the show notes for this episode, and you'll be able to find them by going to letteringtutorial.com/hand lettering podcast 5. Or if you just go to letteringtutorial.com and click on podcasts in the menu, there'll be a list of all of the existing podcasts for this series. And you can find episode 5 there, and you can then comment on the comment section of the show notes, so you can ask anything you want there. I will see you, or I will be back next week for the episode featuring an artist, a piece of their work, a quote, and questions and answers. If you do have any questions that you'd like me to answer, I can't guarantee that I'll get them into that episode because I usually work a little bit kind of ahead of schedule, but they're more than likely will end up in episode, what will it be, episode 8 I think then. So again, send those in to ask@letteringtutorial.com if you'd like to know anything about hand lettering at all, brush lettering, calligraphy, any of it. Send your questions my way, and I will do my best to answer them in a future episode. Thank you so much for listening, and again, thank you for all the feedback that you've sent me. Thank you for tagging me in your lettered pieces of the quotes that I give out in episodes. It's so inspiring and encouraging to see the work that you're creating from listening to this podcast series. So thank you so much. I really look forward to seeing what you create in 2016 with the quotes that I give out that you can hand letter. If you have enjoyed this episode, please could I ask that you leave an honest review in iTunes or Stitcher or whatever other platform it is that you use to listen to the podcast on, because as I mentioned at the beginning, your feedback helps me to shape future episodes, and it can obviously help everybody if I know what you want, you like, what you don't like, etc. So please feel free to do that. It would be great to hear what you think. and I'll be back again next week. Thank you. Bye for now.